Murder at Tolby Lake by R.P. Fitton. Prologue. Tolby Lake, Hamilton, New Hampshire. Death threats are to be taken seriously. Davis set down the phone and backed away. For weeks, he knew he would have to use his connections in Boston to get a handgun. Now a man's clear voice harassed him openly from the choppy cell phone. Maybe the fight at Club Max last night still had some lowlife upset. He walked to the A-framed house's sliders and peered out over Tolby Lake's blue water. He had watched that lake frozen in the winter and as the fall foliage fell to the ground. All the crazy parties, the booze, and the sex. A few times last week as summer approached, people walked the trails along the lake, and he'd even seen kayakers and rowboats crossing the water. "Who do I call?" he asked out loud. Desiree was gone. He couldn't call Hamilton Fletcher after smacking the old fool in the face this afternoon. Fletcher threatened to take away his grant money. The phone rang again. It was a long, old-fashioned ring, the kind they used to have on the black table model phones when he was a kid. All the parties had ended. All the guests had left for good. "This is Brad Davis." Breeze rumpled against the phone mouthpiece.
"Hey, Davis, you getting nervous?"
"Who the hell is this?"
"I'm the man who's gonna kill you."
"What did I do?" He laughed and the breeze picked up again.
"Nothing to me. You simply have pushed the wrong person over the edge, my friend. Now I've been asked to intervene."
"Who asked you?" He laughed again.
"Oh, you and this individual are well acquainted."
"You're enjoying this." "I can defend myself. I have weapons."
"You have nothing. I know every square inch of that cottage. You have no weapons. Don't worry, Bradley. It will be over quickly."
"Tell me why."
"Because I enjoy killing. My only concern, Bradley, is taking you down. And I know Mr. Fletcher took your car away. You should have just done your job."
"How do you know about my job?"
"You're a dead man, Bradley."
The dial tone sounded. Davis slowly dropped the phone to the receiver. Maybe it was a hoax. He walked quickly to the bar. He mixed himself a vodka and cool cranberry juice from the refrigerator. Then he dropped in the ice. His tenure at Hamilton College had ended with a right cross to Hamilton Fletcher's nose. The entire genetically altered food enterprise would continue, no doubt, but without him. Boston was no longer safe. Maybe even the West Coast was an option. The wild ride had ended. In the beginning of Murder at Tolby Lake, we meet Professor Brad Davis, who won't be around very much longer because he's the one about to get killed. Davis had death threats and was taking them seriously. He's at the lake house owned by Hamilton Fletcher on the edge of Tolby Lake, near Hanson's Marina on the southeast portion of town. Hamilton Fletcher himself had been over at the lake house earlier in the day. It was Davis's luxurious and lascivious lifestyle that had Hamilton Fletcher always concerned about the image of Hamilton College, up in arms, to the point where Davis actually smacked Hamilton Fletcher in the mouth. Hamilton Fletcher had hired Davis to perform genetic research, which Fletcher would invest in as part of his family's vast fortune. But now, Davis knew that his time at the college was over. What's making it worse is a phone call that comes into his cell phone and telling him he's a dead man. Watching this entire scene are two people who have come down from another part of the state in the springtime for their summer sojourn on Tolby Lake, Irene and Gus Nickerson. These two snoops keep looking out the window and are enamored by the comings and goings of many nefarious people into the lake house. Strippers, party boys. Gus tells Irene that she's snooping at the lake house more than she watches daytime TV. Odd people are coming and going. Gus gazes across the sandy road at the A-framed house. His signature expression to everything that Irene says is hardy har har. And there's too much hanky-panky going on at the lake house. He talks about the blonde in the skimpy outfit that went into the house. Irene knows there's been death threats on the professor and keeps saying they're going to kill him. The blonde was carried out into a Lincoln, and then somebody took her a silver sports car and drove it away from the lake. Irene took down all the plate numbers of the cars that came and went from the lake house. What really has Irene baffled is the college lady, the professor from Hamilton College. This lady's been out at the A-framed house many times. There's a student that Irene calls Little Rusty who seems to hang all over Brad Davis. Sooner or later, says Irene, somebody will bag him and bag him good. Back at Fletcher Hill, home of the Fletchers who run the town of Hamilton, New Hampshire, Matthias Jones is poolside. Jones is waiting to leave on a fishing trip to Maine with his friends Tom McGill and George Strickland. When he sees Professor Zoey Wilmont walking across the pool area, he seems to be incensed. The college president, Nigel Kent, wonders why Jones is getting so upset about this professor. Apparently, she rebuffed his date to the Cornucopia Theater in downtown Hamilton after going out with him a few times. At that time, the quirky Froggy Finley, Lark's old assistant coach, moves up to Jones. Jones wanders away from him and over to the man that he hired to replace Froggy, Carl Rogers. Carl is limping. He said he twisted his ankle in a pothole near Jones's house. Professor Wilmont comes over to Jones and is incensed that he is spreading rumors about her and Jones dating. The nosy Arnie Dewars from Dewars Lumber is the one who's been spreading the rumors. Not only that, the security cop, Bucky Driscoll, has been broadcasting it on his campus radio. Jones says that Wilmont is a pain, calls her Little Miss Sassy. Nigel says to Jones, "You have an inordinate interest in Professor Wilmont." Wilmont's dark eyes and brows complemented her dark hair. She had precise words and expressions. Jones doesn't want to take her guff. Who does she think she is? Her perfume causes him to sneeze, and she smiles and remains very snooty and smug. He calls her Miss Wilmont, and she corrects him and says Ms. Wilmont. And then she says this is only a small college in the corner of New Hampshire, so don't get too uppity up. She wishes him more years of bliss at this small college. She leaves and Jones calls her a pip. Local tough guy Cocoa Stefani, Jones's friend, calls him and wishes him well on his trip to Maine. And then he says, "Why the hell would I want to sleep in a tent on the ground, Jonesy?" But he wants to know who Brad Davis is. He's a loudmouth SOB. He kicked Davis out of Club Max last night because Davis kicked over a table. Jones says he'll talk to Davis. Carl comes over and further rubs in the point that Jones is at a small college and asks Jones how he can stand to be stuck at this level. Jones says he's very happy, but Carl wants the fast track. The Fletcher maid, Juanita, calls Jones into the house. He has a call from George Strickland. Jones is excited because he and Strickland are ready to drive to Maine to meet Tom McGill at the cabin. Carl waves to Jones and says he's going home to Seattle. When Jones answers the phone, Strickland has bad news. They're not going to Maine. There's been a murder. It's Brad Davis. Jones finds out that one of the Hamilton College students, an Amy Pollard, is in custody, and now Nigel takes his whiskey straight up. Jones heads out to the cottage at Tolby Lake. He tries calling Tom McGill up in Maine, but cannot get a hold of him. Jones finds out that Jerry St. Clair, the former owner of the paper, is running the paper in McGill's absence. Jones is called upstairs to Hamilton Fletcher's upper study. Hamilton is frantic that the image of the school will be ruined by what's happened. As he sits at his roll-top desk off the main bedroom, he tells Jones that Davis took a swing at him just this afternoon. He has $150,000 invested in genetic research. Davis was off the rails. Hamilton Fletcher was always engaged in an argument with Davis, but he makes the comment, "I never let arguments get in the way of making money. Who killed the son of a bitch?" Jones says, "Well, I'll find the truth," but Hamilton says, "Who cares about the truth? I want it squelched." Hamilton then calls the town lawyer, L.G. Bentley, and tells him to get his ass out to the lake house. Hamilton also sends Jones out to Tolby Lake. Apparently Davis had smacked some woman in the face also. As he moves into the lake house, he meets a lanky man in a blue suit and a hat. He raps on the door. The man is standing there with a smoldering cigarette in his mouth. He looks at Jones and says, "3 shots to the chest." He's Jerry St. Clair, running the local paper in McGill's absence. At that time, he says that the word is out on Jones. Jones just shakes his head. McGill is incognito. He still can't get a hold of him. Jerry, as if living 50 years ago, says he's going to get a page 1 exclusive of this murder. Jones just stands there with his mouth open. He looks out at Tolby Lake, then he meets one of the Prince William cops, Tully. Jerry approaches Tully and says, What's the dirt on the broad that's under arrest? More cruiser lights appear near the lake as Jerry's butane lighter flares outward. Professor Wilmont's white Audi is in front of the lake house. Jones doesn't understand why she is out there. Strickland moves in from the back of the house with his deputy, Wendell Harris. He tells Jones that Brad Davis was shot in the head. And then Strickland looks over at Jerry Sinclair with an odd sneer and says, "What the hell are you doing back in town?" Strickland has found out that the Lincoln town car that left with the blonde was owned by a Leonard Trainer who works for Boston mobster Albert Fiore. The silver Porsche was owned by a man named Jake Corbis. Strickland is back at the Sliders with Jones. Amy Pollard is not talking, according to Professor Wilmont. Strickland brings Jones outside the Sliders and shakes his head. He thought they had run Jerry St. Clair out of town. He tells Jones that Davis was shipped out here by Hamilton after numerous incidents. He asks Jones, why are the slider handles on the gun wiped clean? Strickland shakes his head. He just wanted to go on vacation. Jerry St. Clair has disappeared, making Strickland nervous. He stepped outside for another cigarette. Jones and Strickland move over to Amy Pollard, who is sitting with Professor Wilmont. Amy says that she didn't kill Brad. Professor Wilmont, she's hired the college lawyer, Miss Myrtle Brown. Amy says at 7:30 she entered through the Sliders. She talks about Brad and calls her professor Zoey. Jones wants to know why Wilmont gets so familiar with the students. Strickland wonders whether Amy had some other type of relationship. Amy said when she came in, Brad was already on the floor, dead. The gun was on the rug. Amy is to be brought down the station for suspicion of murder. She admits she was involved with Davis. Gus and Irene Nickerson saw Amy Pollard arrive during the Wheel of Fortune. Irene heard a scream. All the other cottages along the lake are not open yet, as it's late spring. Out front, Jerry is arguing with Pollard and Wilmont and tells them he's going to put everything in the morning edition. Jones says that they should nix Merkel Brown and get L.G. Bentley. Wilmont says that Bentley is a male lawyer. Jones doesn't think that Amy Pollard killed Brad Davis. The next morning, Franny serves Jones's breakfast at the Colonial House. Jerry keeps calling Franny Doll. He wonders why there's no numbers on all the specials. Jones then tells Jerry that he's sticking his nose into George's investigation. Jerry then alludes to the fact that he's going to put out a late edition on this murder. Jones calls Coco. He says he's not going to Maine. And he wants to know if Fiore's involved with this murder. Coco is very evasive. Hamilton Fletcher now needs a summation of everything. He wants to meet right now. Franny calls him King Hamilton I. Jones heads over to Fletcher Hill and into the estate. Hamilton's study door is open. Hamilton turned. He has an ice pack. He says to Jones that everything is sitting on a powder keg. Mel Hayes, his controller and himself, brought Davis in because of his money-making prospects. Davis had threatened Hamilton several times, and yesterday afternoon he was drunk. Hamilton doesn't want the story to be made public. He wants Jones to stay involved in this investigation. He wants inside information. Then he fills glasses of Chivas Regal. Hamilton then begins pontificating how his family was descended from the Halls, a shipping family in Great Britain. Jones, however, is suspicious and wonders if Hamilton had retaliated against Brad Davis. Jerry drives his vintage red T-Bird up to the Hamilton police station. He's guzzling his stomach medicine and puts it back in the glove compartment. One of the local cops, Ned Hobbs, won't let him see Pollard. Jones wonders if Coco was covering for Fiore. Things change when George Strickland tracks down the gun. It's owned by Amy Pollard. Somehow, Jerry St. Clair already knew about the gun being registered to Pollard. Jones can't believe either the guy is very lucky or he's got some streetwise savvy that brings him in information. At that time, Merkel Brown tells Jones that you'll have no contact with my client. Jones is fearful of the Fiore crime family. Jerry is getting on Jones's nerves. Jerry says that he's gonna nail old man Fletcher with a scoop. Jones can't believe he's using all these antiquated cliches and expressions. Jerry's in the Enterprise office. He sits at an old mechanical typewriter. He tells Jones the cops always get upset when they get scooped. He's gonna make this whole town spin. He sits there smoking a cigarette and Rebecca, McGill's secretary, tells him it's a non-smoking office, but he continues to smoke. Jones drives his Jeep past Hanson's Marina and takes the exit for Tolby Lake. The dirt road winds through the woods. There's mud-dried potholes. He talks to Kevin Phillips from the Prince William Police Department. They're ready to question Cocoa Stefani at Club Max. Jones receives a call from Coco, who says,
Call Gallagher in case they bring me in.
There's yellow police tape strewn through the trees around the lake house. One Hamilton cruiser is up front. Jones talks to Gallagher, who wants to know if Coco is involved with the murder. As Jones walks up the deck of the A-frame structure, he spots a trail of cigarette ashes on the deck. Jerry St. Clair must be lurking about somewhere. Jones then wonders if someone could have hiked around the lake to kill Davis. The lake is surrounded by vines and brush around the shore. Back to Shore Road by car is 15 minutes. As Jones goes to investigate the shore, crosses over the Pine Needle Trail and toward a spillway. At the spillway is Professor Wilmont. She again erupts into him, asking him why he's spreading rumors about us around town. He wants to know why she's out there alone. They both head toward a boat along the shore. She takes one way, he takes another, and she gets stuck in the swamp. When they meet, Jones wonders if a silencer was used to kill Brad Davis. Jones wants to clock the time across the lake in a boat. At Sal's Grill along the ocean, Jones talks to Strickland and tells him that Wilmont knows more than what she's saying. At that time, Arnie Dewars and Muddy Jacobs harass Jones, and Arnie tries to get a job for Muddy painting Jones's house. Jones doesn't want Muddy near his house, and Arnie just says, touchy, touchy. Jerry St. Clair has a scoop on the front page of the morning edition. In it, he implies that Jones has nailed Hamilton Fletcher for the murder. He says that Jones has verified everything about it. The Fletchers are now livid and screaming at Jones. Jones heads down to the police station where Amy Pollard is sitting in a cell reading a romance novel. Upon talking to her, he finds out that somebody must have stolen her gun. It was missing a day before the murder. He wants to know why she even needed a gun. But it was Brad Davis who suggested that she get a gun. Now he wants to know what was really going on out there, but she won't say. Wilmont knew she had a gun, and Wilmont had access to her apartment. Brad Davis has been back and forth to Boston, hitting all the strip joints owned by Albert Fiore, one in particular, the Glass Slipper in Boston. Jones then finds out information that Professor Dumont somehow knew Brad Davis and was always talking to Davis like they both knew something. When Jerry St. Clair hides the Nickersons, Strickland begins yelling at him. Hamilton Fletcher is on the phone with Jones, livid. The coroner calls George Strickland. Brad Davis was killed between 4 p.m. and 4:30. Amy Pollard arrived at the lake house at 7:30. Jones then learns that Cocoa Stefani has been taken into the police station. Jones still can't find McGill in Maine. He's incognito. L.G. Bentley has filed on behalf of Hamilton Fletcher a lawsuit against Jerry St. Clair in the paper. Father Gallagher calls Jones. He's at the PW Medical Center. Two thugs broke into Cocoa Stefani's cell. They rush Coco. Gallagher, a former boxer, broke one guy's jaw. Kevin Phillips says that the people who broke in were Fiore men. Gallagher now needs a good stiff martini. Gallagher is afraid he'll be prosecuted because he was once a professional boxer before becoming a priest. Herbert Lane, the district attorney, says that Hamilton Fletcher is holding something back. The reason the two thugs got in the cell was the vice cop, Kip Bosco, was eating a sub at the time and let them in. Jones heads over to Club Max. Jerry St. Clair has been doing shots at the bar and is now sitting at a table with the cigarettes smoldering. He's playing cards. Jones talks to Gabe, the bartender. Cocoa Stefani's been taken to Chelsea, Massachusetts near the Tobin Bridge. Gabe asks Jones to go and break Coco out. Strickland tells Jones that Pollard tested positive for firing the gun, yet she wasn't at the house. Jones then performs the test of the kayak on the lake to find out how long it would take to cross that lake and kill Brad Davis. He and Wilmont are together in a kayak, moving across the lake to test the time it would take to cross the lake to kill Brad Davis. At that time, shots ring out. They hunker over and head toward shore. Somebody has been trying to kill them. Wilmont says they could be out there. Jerry St. Clair adds to the confusion by headlining a story against Father Gallagher. Prince William priest attacks prisoner. Gallagher is frantic and thinks that he's going to be thrown out of town. Carl Rogers, Jones' assistant coach, follows Jones to the locker room. Gallagher's on the phone and Jones says he was just trying to stop a kidnapping. Finally, Tom McGill calls and he finds out that Jerry St. Clair has blamed Hamilton Fletcher and all hell is broken loose in Hamilton. McGill says that Jerry was there just to edit and oversee the operation. Jones tells him that he defamed Gallagher and Hamilton Fletcher. McGill is going to fly back when he gets to Portland, Maine. Carl limps out of the locker room, still smarting from falling in that pothole near Jones's house. Jones now knows that Fiore thugs have kidnapped Cocoa. He doesn't tell Strickland that he's leaving for Boston, but Strickland tells him that Davis had unlimited use of Hamilton Fletcher's yacht and somehow he had linked up with the Fiore operation in Boston. Jones goes down to Hanson's Marina before he leaves for Boston. Jerry St. Clair is there, and he starts mouthing off about how information sells newspapers. Captain Kendall shakes his head, and he thought Jerry had left town for good. Jerry wants to know if the coppers have been over here. The captain gives Jones another bit of information. Davis, the night before, had left out of here in a small whaler toward the Paquonicket River. Perhaps he picked something up. He also tells Jones that Professor Wilmont was always around Davis and on the yacht. They were either arguing or lecturing. The captain could see it all from his office on the docks. Jones leaves with Gabe to the FX Jackson Plumbing Warehouse near the Tobin Bridge in Chelsea, Massachusetts. Gabe has gotten him a gun and he holds a revolver upward as they move down the long corridor of the warehouse. When Gabe returns, two goons appear up front. They backtrack and enter the warehouse through a side window. Somebody is smacking Cocoa around. Jones and Gabe are about to pounce on the two guys when Jerry St. Clair appears and starts mouthing off. The two guys smack Jerry to the ground, and then they move out with Cocoa. Jones doesn't see Gabe, and he's livid at Jerry St. Clair. He wants to know where the Nickersons are, and Jerry just tells him it's confidential. He wants to blindfold Jones, and he'll bring him to the Nickersons. Jones is absolutely livid. He's calling for Gabe, but he can't find him. He says Jerry's a sneak and followed him down there. I have the goods on your Dr. Wilmont. Somebody named Gordy, who he had used at his paper in Philadelphia, had done a background check on Wilmont. Jones agrees to go to the Nickersons, but he'll drive. Jerry wants Jones to hand over his cell phone, which he refuses to do, and he also refuses to put on the blindfold and follows Jerry across Revere, Massachusetts. Jerry is driving 80 miles an hour on a state road. Jones calls George Strickland and lets him know that Jerry is heading across Revere. Local police have been advised, and Kevin Phillips from the Prince William Police Department has issued an arrest warrant for Jerry on obstruction of justice charges. Jerry then says he hacked out Wilmont's background on a computer. She was involved in swimming and track and had perfect high school references. Wilmont had the key to Pollard's apartments. Jones agrees to the blindfold as they go up the elevator. Jerry says it'll cost him a C-note and $200 to Jerry. Jerry takes Jones's gun and Jones is livid. Gus and Irene Nickerson are standing in the small room off the corridor. Jerry had told them that Jones was a mafia killer. Jones is livid, but he manages to get information from Gus and Irene. The stripper was dragged out of the lake house. He says that Amy Pollard was beat on by Brad Davis just last week. Irene shows him a notebook with all the license plates of the comings and goings at the lake house. She also mentions how Wilmont would come into the lake house to meet with Davis, carrying a briefcase as she walked in. Jones learns the name of the stripper, Desiree Paradise, working at the Glass Slipper down in Boston. Jones then takes the notebook and Jerry threatens to shoot him. Jones does not let Jerry see him rip out the page in the notebook with all the license plates inside. He throws the notebook over the railing. Jerry runs out of the room to retrieve the notebook. Jerry is stopped when two Fiore thugs meet him at the door. Jones and Jerry will be escorted to Boston. Jones wants to know where they're going, but the guy just says you'll know when you get there. Jerry keeps mouthing off all the way down. Fiore's guys are getting extremely aggravated. They get stuck in traffic in the tunnel under the city. Jerry leaps out of the car and into the tunnel traffic. Shots are fired, but Jones sneaks out the side door and into an 18-wheeler truck cab. He convinces the guy to drop him off at the Glass Slipper. When he arrives at the Slipper, a sleazy strip joint, Jerry St. Clair is standing near the bar. Jerry says that he remembers vaudeville, and Jones doesn't want to hear it. He says Davis had the hots for Paradise. Jones then begins looking for Desiree Paradise, but he finds out that she hasn't been in the Glass Slipper for a few days. Jerry then tries to bribe one of the people there and asks, "How much scratch do you want, Bob?" When the man threatens Jerry, Jerry says that he's not scared. Some big black man comes out of the back and lifts Jones and Jerry up by the armpits. They are dragged into a side office where somebody inside calls Albert Fiore. Then they are brought to an upstairs conference room and the doors are shut. Early the next morning, Jones hears something in the other room and then hears Coco's voice. He opens the door. Coco has a band-aid above his eye and his face is cut. He tells Jones that they drugged him and brought him down here. He says one of Fiore's guys killed Desiree Paradise. He doesn't know who killed Davis. And now, Jerry St. Clair is missing and the side window, at least 30 feet off the ground, is open. Coco says they're meeting with Fiore this morning. He tells Jones that a hitman named Kando was at the lake house. Somehow, they were going to double-cross the guy who killed Desiree. Fiore is part of the mob structure and he works under a guy from Rhode Island. He owns real estate down the coast and other adventures. Albert Fiore tells him he had nothing to do with Davis's murder, and he doesn't want to be associated with the murder. He'll give Jones $25,000 in cash if he finds the murderer. Jones doesn't want the money, but he does want to find the murderer, and he wants no more questions about Davis. On the way to New Hampshire, Coco tells Jones that they call Fiore the master. He has a certain expertise to get things done. Coco says that somebody set up Pollard. He's going to stay clear of the operation and calls somebody named Dulio and asks Jones to bring him down to the docks. He tells Jones that he will call him on a ship-to-shore radio and refuses to tell him where he's going. Jones then hands him a piece of paper with Irene's plate numbers on there. Coco will trace down the tag numbers. McGill is back at his office. He says that Jerry just likes to go at full throttle. Jones is still livid with Jerry St. Clair, even though he doesn't know where he is. McGill admits that Jerry's guy Gordy can dig up anything. Jones looks at a letter that's arrived from Jerry St. Clair. Gordy has dug up something about an incident that happened at Harrison's Cabins on Lake Cayuga in New York. Somebody named Florence Albright. Whatever happened up there ruined her life, and it had to do with Brad Davis. There must have been an assault on Floey. McGill calls Marge at the Marlboro. Jerry's not there. He and the T-Bird left an hour ago. McGill tells Jones that Jerry recently jumped out of a 727 airliner. Jones just shakes his head, and then McGill tells him Jerry was hung up in a tree for 48 hours. Jones wants to know how old this guy is. Early 80s. Jones is then talking to Coco on a ship-to-shore radio. When Jones goes home, he sees the pothole was finally filled in where Carl Rogers twisted his ankle. He calls the town to thank them, and Bud at the town barn gives him a hard time and says that pothole was filled in last week. Jones just shakes his head and heads down to Sal's Grill. Strickland tells him that Bud is always pissed off. Amy Pollard is now in a Prince William jail cell awaiting arraignment from Herbert Lane. Strickland's cell rings and he finds out that Professor Wilmont has left the area. Jones mentions Harrison's Cabins and that Wilmont's best friend in life had her life ruined at Harrison's Cabins. Strickland said it doesn't look good for Amy Pollard because she doesn't have an alibi. Jones goes over to Parkview Apartments where Amy Pollard lived. Arnie Dewars lives there, but he never saw Pollard, just a lot of parties. But he did see Wilmont's outing on the day of the murder. Strickland thinks that Fiore is in this more deeply than he thought. Jones has to keep quiet about Coco on the lam. He thinks the Brad Davis murder was a professional job. Arnie then says he wants Muddy Jacobs to definitely paint Jones's house, and Jones says no. At the end of the day, Jones and Franny are at the Colonial House. They talk about getting tickets for the Red Sox game. Coco calls him on the ship to shore. He says that Wilmont was talking to Davis, and Davis knew who killed Desiree Paradise. Davis had cooperated with the boat run up the river. Then they had somebody take him out. He tells Jones to assume that Fiore is watching. They leave the Colonial House and move up Franny's Walk. He tells Franny he's headed for New York, to Harrison's cabins, to find out what happened to Wilmont's friend. He crosses the Connecticut and then the Hudson River into New York. On Lake Cayuga, he locates Harrison's cabins. Unfortunately, Jerry's red T-Bird is parked next to one of the cabins. The manager of the cabins tells him there's no Mr. St. Clair here, although a Mr. Rogers checked in, Fred Rogers. Jerry is there checking the open cabins. He said this is where Chloe Albright was attacked. Jerry says to Jones that Fiore's paws are all over what happened at the lake house. And then he says something about Mr. X, further exasperating Jones. Somebody stole Wilmont's key to Amy Pollard's apartment. Jerry says the murder was a dummy. Jones concentrates more on the boat run by Davis. It wouldn't necessarily have to be drugs. Early the next morning, Jerry wakes him up at 5 a.m. yelling, "Wake up, sunshine." Jerry begins stripping down into his bathing suit and a muscle undershirt. He leaps into the lake. He says he's going for a morning swim in the lake. There's a soothing haze across the lake as Jerry jumps in and begins his swim. At that time, Arnie Dewis calls Jones on his cell and tells him that Muddy Jacobs started painting Jones's house. He said the front is all set, that Muddy wants a flat price which Jones refuses to pay, and then Jones becomes irate when he finds out that Muddy has painted his house pink. And Arnie is telling him, "You owe me money for the paint." Thunder begins booming across the valley and onto the lake. He calls through the air for Jerry, but he can't spot him. There's dense, dark clouds approaching. Soon the clouds block the sun. Cold air pushes forward before the rain. Jones takes the newspapers and Jerry's clothes back to his cabin. He calls 911 and can't believe that Jerry has performed this swimming stunt. The rain is coming down heavily now as Zoey Wilmont arrives at one of the cabins. She approaches him outside the screen, looking dazed. She says to him, "You found everything else out," and cries into his windbreaker. She says that Brad Davis smashed her friend Chloe in the head with an oar. He pushed her into the water and then just left her to die. A man on shore saved her, but she had oxygen deprivation. There was no proof that Davis did it, even though she knew he did. Jones wants to know if somebody did copy her key to get into Amy Pollard's apartment. She didn't know, but she did say that Davis did not deal in drugs. He was down at the Pequannock to pick up a package for Albert Fiore. She never met Fiore, but she did meet Lenny the Falcon and Jake Corbis. Jones talks about the Falcon and the mysterious Kando, the hitman. Jones says they should put her car at a parking garage in Binghamton and head back to Hamilton. There's no sign of Jerry now, and Jones fears that he's died in the lake storm. Jones drives with Zoey Wilmont across Massachusetts and back to Hamilton. He begins practice a few days later as Lark and Froggy Finley are at his summer practice. Jones leaves a message for Carl, but Coco calls him directly on a cell phone. Kando, the hitman, has been linked to higher-ups in Rhode Island and Arizona. He says the man named Dulio is off to Rhode Island to check up on Kando. Jones has convinced Gallagher to take Wilmont in at the rectory. Coco tells Jones to meet him in New Bedford, Massachusetts in Weld Square. He has more information for Jones and he needs him as a witness when he goes to Rhode Island. Jones takes the interstate the next morning to Weld Square. Soon they're on the highway to Rhode Island. Coco smells of smoke and salt. He tells Jones that he's not going to hide on boats anymore and is going to build himself a hiding place if he gets in trouble with the police. Jones knows he has to locate Kando. Coco is afraid they'll come after him if he fingers Kando directly. In Newport, Rhode Island, in an outside restaurant, an older man with silver hair approaches Coco at the restaurant table outside. He said that Kando showed up last year, and he's convinced that Kando is still around. He tells Coco they want Kando dead. Strickland calls Jones and wants to know where he is and what's going on and where Dr. Wilmont is. He tells Jones to meet him at the Prince William Police Station at 6 p.m. Herbert Lane, the district attorney, will be there, and he needs to call L.G. Bentley for representation. If he knows where Wilmont is, he needs to call L.G. Bentley for representation. Jones brings Wilmont up to the Prince William Police Station. LG lays into Herbert Lane, completely disarming his arguments about harboring a fugitive, and says there's no proof. Strickland was tired, and they move into a side chamber. On Jones's cell phone, he finds that Falcon and his guys are after Kando also. Cocoa says that Fiore called him himself. They don't want Kando opening his trap. They want you and Wilmont, according to Cocoa, and Pollard. Cocoa wants Jones to head for his place on Crescent Street. Jones complains about Roland Chance, the flamboyant assistant district attorney at the police station in Hamilton. Jones brings Zoey back to Hamilton along the Shore Road, a deserted beach road that connects Prince William with Hamilton. The road gets worse as the sun flickers across the marsh grass. He hears the crack of a rifle. The Jeep now has a blown tire. More shots hit the back of the Jeep. Pieces of plastic are flying. Jones's Jeep slides onto the beach. He heads over to the rock jetty where he and Wilmont climb over the jetty to protect themselves. Jones is behind her as automatic weapons are emptied into the water. They crawl down the beach toward Hanson's Marina, where they spot Froggy Finley along the boats. Froggy commandeers a boat. Jones says, "Get us out of here." But as Froggy pulls away, somebody is boarding a boat at the dock. They won't take any risks. The bullets hit into the glass, and Froggy suffers a wound in the arm. And holding a beer can, he tightens a tourniquet on his arm. Jones tries to move the wheel, but it seems stuck. The upper portion of the boat is riddled with bullets. A shadowy figure steps out onto the dock. Jones and Wilmont jump into the water as the boat just keeps going. And then there's an explosion with a mushroom flash. Wilmont and Jones move onto the dock pylons. A salt, danky breeze blows onto the dock. Carl Rogers, his assistant coach, toting an AK-47, yells down at Jones, "You weren't smart enough, coach." They exit the other side of the dock and up the stairs into the captain's apartment, followed by Carl. As Carl corners them, Jones removes the harpoon from the wall and shoots it at Carl, killing him instantly in the chest. And Jones says he can't believe this man was the killer right under his nose. He says, "Never dismiss the obvious, Zoe, it could kill you." Back on the practice field, Jones has a new coach. Arnie Dewis is calling him a loser coach. Lark and Froggy are trying to get a position on Jones's team, but Jones has already hired Woozy, the defensive coach, when he was back in Indiana. Arnie tries to hustle on to Franny, saying, Hey, Franny!" He's rebuffed by Franny. Jerry St. Clair seems to be alive. He sent Tom McGill a letter from Florida. He said there was a jewel heist down the river to the shore from the upper rapids in Maine. Amy Pollard has been brought to a safe house, and Lenny the Falcon is under arrest. Jerry says that Pinky Harris took care of things for him. Wilmont realizes that using other people is a crime in itself, and she wished she hadn't got involved the way she did with Brad Davis. Jones's cell rings. It's Cocoa Stefani. Cocoa issues a rare apology for doubting Jones. He said that Mr. Fiore was impressed by Jones's use of the harpoon against Kando. In the background, they're building something, some getaway where he can hide if he has to run from the cops. He invites Jones over to Club Max, but in the background, Cocoa is building something. He wants to be able to hide from the cops whenever he wants to.